What's up, everybody? This is the Digital World Podcast. Today, I want to discuss a few things and I want to end on a very interesting note on a video that Mike Maloney did. And we'll get that towards the end. You want to stay tuned for that. Let's start with this. I just want to remind you again the Spark token. I like what Jungle Inc. says here. And thanks to him for his input. He says you can still claim your spark, and at this point you have to. I mean, he couldn't have said it any better. Maybe the price crashes when supply hits, but you can't take the chance. And even if it does, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But I think people understand what it's bringing. And I know I sound like a broken record saying it over and over in the past few videos, but get involved, or I at least encourage you to learn about it. Now, I'm not saying FOMO in, but you know, this is not financial advice. But learn some more about it and get yourself a something, So let's continue here. JP Morgan is looking for a crypto clearinghouse. Now, this is interesting. It says Forbes reported the news on Monday, citing a senior JP Morgan executive. We will fundamentally need a crypto clearinghouse to see that liquidity. Once that exists, bank will move their liquidity to it. Huh. What does that sound like? Can you use something maybe like a bridge currency? Does that sound familiar? I think I might know a crypto or two that could serve that function. And so it's you can read the article, it's a short read, but I think that just raised my eyebrow a little bit, and it makes me think. You see a lot of these things, you read a lot of these things, you hear a lot of these things, and it seems like it's a coincidence, but once it keeps happening more than once, it's I would like to think that it's a common theme and something that's actual, that's true and that's being used as that. But to each their own. I think that some people say until I see it on paper or I see it written as a document or being used, then I'll believe it. But by then, your investment opportunity will be too late. Right now, we're pioneering this. We're the early investors, and sometimes being early comes with with some bumps on the road. So next up, I want to show this video by Digital Asset Investor. And I know we just saw with the JP Morgan, they're looking for kind of a middleman, a bridge, if you would think of it that way. And here, I believe this is Navin Gupta, in which he talks about why central banks are comfortable working with Ripple and using XRP. Give a listen.
Suddenly there is a 10% decrease in your total working capital requirement. And when we explain this to the central bank to essentially say, hey, just by increasing the velocity of money, exactly what they're trying to do in the domestic payment system, we are able to do it in a cross-border payment system. And you are able to get a higher growth rate because we are able to turn around money much more faster. Exactly. Think of money as inventory, and then you are churning into more cycles, and hence you are able to get a better GDP output or a better growth rate. They love it, right? And the other part that they love is that we work only with regulated financial institutions, because one thing central banks worry about is unregulated, unscrupulous actors essentially getting into the space which they are not able to manage. But once we are working with banks or PSPs who are already regulated by the central bank, they have already seen 10, 20, 30 years of performance and behavior from them, then they feel totally comfortable, because then they say, even if it's a new technology, what we are doing is we are empowering existing players to become better. And then, of course, the benefits to be passed on to the citizens or to the corporates whom the central banks serve anyway.
And thank you for Digital Asset Investor for posting this. Now, I want to make one point here, or raise a question, or say a statement. He said they like that we're working with institutions, with banks or whoever that may be, that have experience or are credible. And we know that Ripple is not consumer facing by any means. Okay? So what's created, what we're invested into, it's not meant for us. And I think that this opportunity that we have to hold on to it is amazing in the fact that we know that the utility that it brings, how it's so fast. It can settle within 3 to 5 seconds. It can um, do thousands of transactions. Okay, and honestly, we saw in my earlier videos, Chris Larson said he sees it as a bridge currency to these G5 currencies, and so you gotta wonder, you gotta wonder what more there is to it. I think we haven't seen it at its best yet, and the best is yet to come. Now, I want to kind of transition here. I saw this reply from Blockchain Bagger to a tweet, and I thought it was very interesting because the next video I'm going to show you discusses a very possible scenario. Now it says he said he what no one wants to talk about is, when he's replying here to someone saying they just received their stimulus check, he says, what no one wants to talk about is they've been selling us the idea of this stimulus check for 6+ months, and there are no more on the horizon. So you can speculate, you can say what you want. I just thought this was a very interesting tweet because I'm going to play you a video by Mike Maloney in which he discusses possible scenarios of what could happen in the future. And if you're well prepared, for the coming crisis, if you will, then you're much more comfortable. And so, and also, if you want to read this article that they're discussing, yeah, go ahead and read it and see what it's about. But I'm gonna give you a short snippet of why of the segment, which is great. Go watch it and follow this guy, Mike Maloney. He's great, and Jeff Clark as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and play this clip.
But we're at this crossroads right now where we don't actually know what's going to happen. Who was it that you were saying was, I believe that we could be going into this 1920s style boom for like a couple of years here. Who was it that you were saying was just writing about that?
Yeah, I mentioned that before we came on air here. That was Frank Holmes at U.S. Global Investors, who I have a lot of respect for. But his research, he's suggesting that we could be on the cusp of another roaring 20s, just like back in the 1920s. And we all know what that eventually led to. But he's thinking the demand is going to really jump here and push inflation a lot higher.
It's not going to last 8 years, though, like it did during the roaring 20s. It's going to, if that happens, it'll probably last like a year or two. And it's because of all of the pent-up demand from COVID and the lockdowns suppressing everything, the GDP, the economy, and people's own demand, their gratification, plus all of the stimulus injected during that period of time. Now, that's very similar to episode 7 of Hidden Secrets of Money, where I talk about velocity. And, when people's anxiety is high, velocity slows and they save currency. You lift that anxiety and suddenly all that currency comes flooding out. You have an economic boom. It starts off as something that looks good to everybody. And all of the Keynesian central bankers and economists are going to be trotting out how right they were and that this worked. But then, there's so many examples throughout history where you go through this good period, but that good period is just the on-ramp to hyperinflation and an economy that's entirely destroyed. He also thinks that this is exhibiting classic bubble dynamics. And if we go into this roaring 20s, all it is doing is inflating the bubble higher and making the eventual implosion so much greater. But that will do things like cause gold, silver, and cryptos to explode much higher than they would if we just go into a crash right now. Either way, I think it's going, whatever the crash is, it's going to be devastating when the implosion comes. But the more we inflate this, the worse it gets. Are there any other things that you took?
Now, those are some big statements by him, and he's very intelligent. He puts out great content, and we might be entering into what he said was the Roaring Twenties. It won't last as long. It'll probably be like a year or two, he says. Now, another thing I wanted to mention was velocity, right? If people have anxiety and don't want to spend, they'll hold on to their money. And you can print as much as you want. $7 trillion, for example. 7 trillion times zero is still zero. And I'm referring to velocity. If you're printing all this money, but people aren't spending it and having that money flow into different areas, for example, if you get paid, you go to the grocery or you get a taxi, you pay the taxi. That taxi uses that money to go fill gas. That gas goes on, so forth and so on. If you print all this money, but people aren't using taxis or buying food or all these other things, then there's no velocity. It's stagnant. And so, if you haven't seen his episode 7 that he mentioned, go watch it. It's very good. And so, the point I want to bring here is, do you know what you own? Are you well positioned? If we enter into this hyperinflationary time period, yes, it might look good initially, but the end, might not be so good. However, control what you can control. If you see Blockchain Backer's video today, he's positioning himself in a great situation where he can make money regardless. So control the things you can control, and the other things are out of your hands. You just do the best that you can with the opportunities that are given to you. I hope this episode has brought you some value. Like and subscribe. Share with others and let them know that we might be entering into a 1920s sort of economy. This is the Digital World Podcast, and I'll see you on the next episode.